Hi everybody, this is Mary Jean Sullivan from Hollins University, and welcome to my little video about how to apply for financial aid, the different kinds of financial aid, and some tips and tricks for you to get more money. In other words, Financial Aid 101. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at the beautiful Hollins University, and that's me, and that arrow is pointing to my office, so you can picture me sitting at my desk while we're going through this presentation. So the first most obvious question is, well, how do I even apply for financial aid? It's actually very simple. So the first step is you want to get admitted to the college that you want a financial aid offer from, because financial aid people like me don't go to the trouble of putting together a financial aid package and sending it to a student unless they're already admitted. So that kind of makes sense there. The second is pretty much every school wants you to fill out a FAFSA. And I'll talk more about what the FAFSA is in a second, but it's the financial aid application, and you're going to want to fill out the 2021-22 FAFSA. It's open as of October 1st, 2020. The third thing is you should check each college's financial aid deadlines. So some schools will have a separate financial aid application where you can apply for different scholarships, but maybe you have to schedule an audition, or you have to fill out something online to qualify for the separate application. So you just want to pay attention to the deadlines. Also, some schools require you to file your FAFSA by a specific deadline in order to qualify for the most amount of aid, so that's why you want to pay attention too. Finally, a handful of universities and colleges require supplemental financial aid forms. For example, the CSS profile. Honestly, most of them don't. But if the college you're applying to does, you want to make sure that you're not missing out and not getting your financial aid package because you forgot to do something. It's really easy just to check the financial aid website at each college you're applying to because they'll tell you what they need. Now, if you're new to financial aid and you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, what's a FAFSA? Well, it's an acronym and it stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. But it's not just for federal student aid. You use it to apply for state aid and college aid too. Basically, everybody looks at it. You fill it out at fafsa.gov, and it uses 2019 income and income tax information. You probably see a little red asterisk right there. If you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I made a lot more money in 2019. This recession has really hurt my family's finances. Don't worry, we'll talk about a workaround in a second. If you're unfamiliar with the 2021-22 FAFSA and you would like some more information, I did create a 15-minute YouTube video that gives a lot of very helpful information and will help you through the process. I'm not going to talk about it here because I already put that video together, but that might be something good you want to take a look at. Now, some families will say, well, I'm not going to fill out the FAFSA because I did before for another child who was going to college, and we didn't qualify for any need-based financial aid. Wrong, don't think that way. Everyone should fill out the FAFSA once, because even if you don't think you're qualified for need-based aid, it's like raising your hand and asking for assistance. So it allows you to apply for aid you didn't even know was out there from that particular college or university. So definitely fill it out. If after the first year you find out you don't need a FAFSA, then great, but it really is worth it. Now, for those families who've had a rough time in 2020 and you're thinking to yourself, ugh, 2019 is not a really good reflection of what I can afford to pay for college. Yes, you still have to put the 2019 income information on your FAFSA. It's required. But if your family's income is significantly less in 2020 than what it was in 2019, for example, you had an unemployment situation, or if you have unexpected financial pressures, you need to let your college financial aid office know. Why? Because we can do something called a professional judgment. It's when we log into your FAFSA and we flag it for the government and say, hey, 2019 is not a good reflection on what's going on in their life right now. Now, it's up to each individual college. So if you are applying to 3 different schools and you think you need a professional judgment, you're going to have to give that information to all 3 colleges. So let me give you an example. If lately you've been dealing with unemployment or retirement or some kind of reduction in income, that's a great opportunity to inquire about a professional judgment. Same thing if you have unreimbursed medical bills that are putting a strain on your finances or some other unexpected expenses. I've had families that dealt with natural disasters or floods in their home or car accidents that really were a strain on their family's finances, or even something simple like having a sibling in a special school because they have special needs and they're paying tuition for that. Or maybe you're taking care of grandparents or there's some other kind of financial pressure. What you want to do is give proof of what's going on with your family and submit a request for a professional judgment to each college that you're applying to. If it's approved, your college will update your already processed FAFSA, and it shouldn't take too long, maybe within 2 weeks. And that college is going to either decide to try to project your 2021 income, reevaluate your 2019 income, or look at your actual 2020 income. It's really up to the school. But this is a really great way to take into account what's happening with your financial aid and your finances right now, so it's more equitable. So what kinds of financial aid are out there? Well, lots, which is great. Hey, the best part is the free money, right? The scholarships and grants, which is why I have little smiley faces here. If you're offered a scholarship or grant, you shouldn't have to repay it, so that's a good thing. We all like that. But there's also student and parent loans that are considered financial aid. Those have to be repaid. And if you're offered them and you don't want them, you don't have to take them, but it is an option. There's also something called work study. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, but work study at a college is a part-time campus job. And it's a bit of a misnomer because it has nothing to do with studying. It's basically a part-time job. And it's considered a form of financial aid because the earnings from your job are helped to alleviate some of your personal expenses. Financial aid comes from various sources. So the federal government offers various kinds of grants, student and parent loans, and work study jobs. So you apply for those through your FAFSA, and the school will offer them to you. Some people qualify for 1 or 2 or 3, some only 1. It all depends on what your FAFSA says and how much funding your school has. If you're a Virginian and you're staying in state to go to college, the Virginia government offers grants as well. And each college and university has their own scholarships and grant programs that they offer, as well as campus jobs. And then there's also all those great outside organizations, whether they're charitable organizations or clubs and community organizations, that'll offer scholarships and grants. And there's banks that'll offer private education loans to help pay for college. So as you can see, there's a lot of different kinds of assistance. So for federal student aid, how do you get it and what do they have? Well, the most common one that we see is the federal Pell Grant. So it's free money. It's a need-based grant, so it depends on your family size, how many are in college, and family income. And if you qualify, there's varying dollar amounts, but the maximum is $6,345 a year. That is a lot. And this year, Pell Grants are available if your FAFSA EFC ranges anywhere between 0 and $5,712. Now, if you aren't sure what a FAFSA EFC is, definitely watch my other little 15-minute FAFSA video because I explain it here. There's also other forms of federal aid, like a federal SEOG grant, which is available to Pell Grant recipients, and the federal work study program, which is that part-time job I was talking about before. It's based on the FAFSA, so you have to make sure you fill it out. But unlike the federal Pell Grant, which if you qualify you get, there are limited funds for SEOG and work study. So it's on a first-come, first-served basis, and the amount given out varies by the college, so it's very different. There's also federal student loans. When you're an active student, you don't have to pay them back. The repayment begins 6 months after the student falls below half-time enrollment status. And most students go full-time. So typically, you start to pay back the loan 6 months after you either withdraw from college or graduate. The great thing is there is no cosigner or credit check required. It is the easiest credit you'll ever get. And it has a very low fixed interest rate. It's only 2 3/4% right now, which is fantastic. What's even better, if you qualify for a subsidized loan because you have high need on your FAFSA, You're not going to accrue any interest while you're in college. I mean, this is really the best loan that you could possibly get in your life. Most freshmen are offered up to $5,500, so the government limits how much you can borrow so you don't get into too much debt. But did you know there's also a federal parent loan? You might see it written on your award letter as PLUS, which is another acronym, and it stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. This is optional. The parent borrows it, so the student has no responsibility for paying it back. There are loan origination fees. So if you borrow $1,000, let's say, the school's only going to get about $957 of it. You still have to pay back the whole $1,000, but just keep in mind that the government does hold back a few percentage points for themselves. Everyone gets the same fixed interest rate. Right now it's 5.3%. And you begin to repay the loan about 2 months after the money arrives at the college. The parent is able to borrow whatever's needed to pay the college bill, which is good, so it's more flexible, but it does require a credit check. So you can kind of see how it's very different from the federal student loan program because it goes into repayment sooner and the parent does have to pass a credit check. If you're interested in a PLUS loan, you apply with the college that you're going to. Now let's talk about state aid for Virginians. So for state financial aid, the student and the parent need to be Virginia residents and stay in state for college. I mean, that makes sense. Taxpayer money wants to stay within the state. Now there is an important point. If you're applying to both public colleges and private universities, the state aid will be different because there's different grants for the publics and the privates. It's kind of bizarre, but it's true. So let's say you're applying to a community college or a state college or university. They have two main forms of state aid. The first is VGAP, which stands for Virginia Guaranteed Assistance Program. It's need-based, so you have to file the FAFSA for it, and the award amount varies. So if you qualify for VGAP at all the different public schools you're going to, you might get a different dollar amount from all of them. You have to be full-time to keep it, and you have to maintain a certain GPA in order to continue to receive VGAP going forward. So your grades do matter for this form of state aid. There's also something called the Virginia Commonwealth Award. It's also need-based, and the award amount also varies per school, but it's a little bit more flexible. For example, you don't have to be full-time for it. The state aid website is schev.edu. schev.edu. So if you want more information about VGAP or the Virginia Commonwealth Award, or really any of the awards I'm going to be talking about, check out schev.edu. The Workforce Credential Grant is really neat. You can learn more about it at schev.edu or elevatevirginia.org. It's for those students who are going to a Virginia community college and want to get an industry-based certification or a license. So maybe they're not going for a whole associate's degree. They might qualify for one of these grants, and it really helps pay for their schooling. If you attend a private college or university in Virginia, let's say Shenandoah University or Hollins University or Roanoke College, there's something called the Tuition Assistance Grant, or TAG for short. So everyone gets the same dollar amount. This year it's $3,520. And it's not based on need at all, so you don't need to fill out the FAFSA at all for this. You just have to make sure you're full-time and that you complete the application that the school gives you by a certain deadline. What's new about this grant, which has been around for a long time, is it's no longer allowed for online programs. I'm not talking about online classes. I'm talking about if you enroll in a major program of study where you're going to be online the whole time, then you can't get TAG. But most schools, you'll be able to get TAG. There's also something called a 2-year college transfer grant. It's based on financial need, but it's a little bit broader, so you don't have to have a whole lot of financial need. And it's merit-based. You might get $1,000 or $2,000 each year. And what's neat, it's for people who graduated from a Virginia community college with an associate's degree, and it's also available for dual enrollment graduates. Okay, now we're going to get into the institutional or college financial aid, what the college or university is going to offer you from their own pockets. There's merit-based aid based on your grades, and if you have SAT or ACT scores, those scores as well. That's typically in the form of a scholarship. And a lot of times you don't have to apply for that. If you're just getting admitted, the admission office knows what your test scores are if you submitted them and your GPA, and the admissions office will actually offer you a scholarship before the financial aid office even does. There's talent-based aid that you can apply for example, maybe a music scholarship or a dance scholarship or athletic aid. And then there's also just need-based aid based on the FAFSA. Each college has its own process for applying for aid, so just investigate on their website just to make sure you're not missing any deadlines. For athletic aid, according to the NCAA, only about 2% of high school athletes are offered a college athletic scholarship, so please don't feel badly if you don't qualify for one. They're rarely full tuition scholarships, and only NCAA Division I or II schools are allowed to offer them. They're awarded for 1 year at a time, and you have to maintain a certain GPA in order for them to renew. Now let's talk a little bit about outside scholarships and where you can get money from other sources. Winter and spring are the best times to apply for outside scholarships, and you should locate those scholarships with the help of your high school guidance office and online search engines. When you're applying for scholarships, sometimes you can get a lot of spam emails, so it might be a really good idea for you to create a separate email for all the spam you'll get. Another thing to know is never pay to apply for a scholarship. If somebody's asking you to pay to apply, it's a scam. Avoid that at all costs. Would you like some free advice? For many scholarship committees, the most important part of choosing who they want to award the money to is the quality of the essay, if they require an essay. So if you're applying for a scholarship that requires you to write an essay, you really need to put time and effort into your scholarship essay. That's the most important part. I know that's not a fun thing for many people, but it's worth it. Another thing is, see if your or your parent's employer offers scholarships. Sometimes they do. So I know of a local supermarket chain that if the student has a part-time job there and they want to major in business, they'll give them a scholarship. It's those little things where the money can add up. So just look into that. Aside from your high school guidance office, which is probably the best resource, you can Google, but here are some scholarship search engines that if you register with them for free and you put in some information about yourself, they'll give you a bunch of suggestions. So niche.com, unigo.com, scholarships.com, Wells Fargo has something called tuitionfundingsources.com, opportunity.collegeboard.com. Those are some popular ones that I see regularly. And if you're an undocumented or DACA student, sometimes outside scholarships require you to be a U.S. citizen or have a green card, but the Esperanza Fund and the Dream.us are both really helpful organizations that offer scholarships regardless of your citizenship status. So you can check that out. Now let's talk a little bit about how you're going to get notified of your financial aid award, whether it's by letter or an email. So each college is going to notify you either by mail or email when your financial aid award notification is ready for you to check out. And each school's letter will look totally different, so they're not going to resemble each other at all, so just make sure you read through it and read the fine print. For example, what scholarships and grants renew each year? Are some only for the first year? That's important for you to know. And what GPA do you need to keep? If you're getting offered a really generous merit scholarship, but you have to keep a 3.5 GPA, that might be really difficult for people. Is there a gigantic Parent Plus loan inserted in there to make it seem like you don't owe any money? If that's the case, you really need to be careful because maybe your parent doesn't want to borrow a large Parent Plus loan. And finally, figure out how much are you going to owe. Colleges in Virginia are required to kind of break that down for you, but if you're applying to schools out of state, they may not. So here's a sample award letter. Let's say you're offered the maximum amount of a federal Pell Grant. You're qualifying for a Virginia TAG grant. You get offered a merit scholarship, a need-based grant, and you've been awarded an outside scholarship. Perhaps you've been offered a federal student loan for $5,500. All of those different things together, the federal aid, the state aid, the outside aid, and the institutional aid from the college, already totals over $43,000. So the next question is, okay, which one of these are renewable? Are they all renewable? Are they first time only? What kind of GPA do I need to keep? And what's the total cost? If the total cost of your education is not much more than the $43,000, that's great news. But if it's a lot more, is that something that you can afford? The good news is that most colleges offer installment payment plans. Many of them are interest-free. They'll just take what you owe for each semester and they'll break it down. So you pay what you owe for the semester over the course of a few months. And you can do that if you'd rather not borrow a Federal Parent Plus loan or private education loan to pay the balance. Lastly, I want to get into the most common mistakes families make when they're applying for financial aid. You would not believe it. So here are the 5 most common financial aid mistakes. Number 5 is when students list the incorrect Social Security number or birth date on their admission application and or their FAFSA. Okay, that's not good. Bring out your Social Security card and double check the number before you submit it. And if a parent is helping you apply for some of these things, sometimes what happens is the parent gets confused on your birth date, believe it or not, or they put their own. Make sure that you're double checking because this can really hold up a lot of the application process. The 4th most common mistake I see is people procrastinate, whether it's missing deadlines or submitting a really bad essay for either their admission application or for an outside scholarship essay, or delaying getting a state scholarship application in. You really don't want to wait to the last minute because it could cost you a lot of money. It's just too important. The 3rd is not reading instructions. Pay attention to what is needed, whether it's for applying for financial aid or applying for an outside scholarship. Take the time. I know a lot of us have a lot of time pressures and we're busy, but it's important to give the people what they're asking for, either in an essay or the application. The 2nd most common financial aid mistake is when people don't do the math on their financial aid award letter. We'll get appeals from people who'll say, hey, can you offer me more money? This other school's giving me more money. And when I do the math, we're actually less expensive. So don't just look at the total of financial aid you're getting, but look at the balance, what's left, what wasn't covered, and really just do the math and pay attention. The number 1 most common mistake I see in my 22 years of financial aid is unrealistic expectations, which can really be a major problem. So for example, I've heard people say, I really love this college, I don't care how much it costs. That really might not be a good idea 4 years later when you have a lot of student loan debt to pay back. Another is when someone says, I can't afford this, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. Because if you can't afford it for the first year, how are you going to do it for the next few years? A 3rd comment I hear a lot is, well, everyone is attending such and such place, so I'm just going to go there too. Everybody's different, and your needs are different. Maybe you need a large school, maybe you need a small school. A lot of people change their majors, so it's probably not a good idea to go to a school that only has one of your interest areas. You really just want to be your own person and go somewhere that you can afford, and that'll be the best fit for you. But one of the most common I hear is, I don't want to get into an argument with my mom or my daughter or my son, so we're not going to talk about whatever the issue is. Never, never good. Because it's really important to focus on logic when you're making a big decision like paying for college versus emotional. So don't follow the crowd. You have to figure out what's best for you. Remember, if you can't afford it now, you're not going to be able to continue to afford it. And some schools really can't help fill in the gap for you. They can't afford the whole thing for you. So it's important for you to really realistically look at what you can afford. And figure out what's your return on investment. Do you really want to get into thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of student loan debt if the starting salary for the career you want to go into is very low? That really might cause you problems down the line. And if your family hasn't had conversations about your expectations, you really need to do so now. You have to be logical. Channel Spock from Star Trek. He didn't make emotional decisions at all. He always used logic to inform his decisions. And that's really helpful in a case like this. So for example, what are the expectations for you and your family? For example, for cost. My parents told me, we don't care what you major in, you just have to figure it out and graduate within 4 years. We're only paying for 4 years. That was very helpful for me to have that expectation because I knew where I stood. And I made sure to graduate within 4 years. When it comes to debt, don't just say, well, I'll just take this student loan and I'll worry about it later. Calculate how much that debt would be over the course of 4 years or more. Then do one of those free debt calculators online and see, are the payments affordable? Could I afford $300 a month every month for 10 years? Am I willing to do that? For time, how much time are you going to give yourself? Do you want to get out in 3 years? Do you want to get out in 4 or 5 years? And for the why are you making this choice? Are you following a friend? Are you going someplace because you think it's fabulous and it's popular, but it's really not the best choice for you? You really have to look at the why behind your decision making. I really want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please check with your guidance office. They're there to help you, and they want to help you through this time. And also get together with your financial aid administrator at whatever college you're going to, and they can help walk you through. Do not be shy about asking questions. That's what we're here for, and we're here to help you. Good luck on your college choice.